All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl. I am really, really excited today because I have a guest on the show who has been a huge part of the Mindful Life practice community since almost the beginning, maybe a few months after we started. I have Jules Allen here with me, and she likes to go by Creative Adventurer. And Jules joined on the Mindful Life practice, and she attends classes every day. So if you have been to any Mindful Life practice classes, I'm sure you have met her. And now she actually teaches for us. So she runs some of our sober classes. So welcome so much. That's a weird thing to say. Welcome, Jules.
Thank you so much. All the muchness. Thank you.
So let's start out. I was wondering if you could give me a little bit of context into telling me about yourself. So who you are and where you're from.
Okay, so can I just say this is my first ever podcast, so I'm a little bit excited and a little bit pooing my pants. And so who knows what words are going to come out of my mouth today, so I'm hoping they'll make some kind of sense. So my name's Jules and I'm from Bristol, which is like in the southwest of the UK, and I am 48. I live with my partner and his 2 children, and I am so grateful. I'm beyond grateful for the Mindful Life practice. I'm not saying that in like a sort of cheesy way. I'm genuinely, like, we've all been through lockdown and COVID and numerous lockdowns, and for me the community and the classes have just been such an anchor. They really have. It's like having, I don't know, all these different people around the world being able to be in my living room and sometimes in my conservatory and sometimes even in bed, which is, I'm sharing it with the world. But yeah, I've been practicing yoga for a really long time, and I was really missing it. I was really missing that connection and being with people and sharing yoga practice. So for me, finding the community sort of, I think it was, a couple of months into lockdown was just, it was like a lighthouse. So yeah, I genuinely mean that. I think, it's having that structure has kept me steady.
And we're so happy you're part of it. Honestly, it wouldn't be the same without you. And some of these people I think about, like, I'm like, what would my life be like without Jules? Like, I don't know. Like, when you're not, I notice when you're not there. And sometimes I say out loud, you've probably heard me in the on-demand classes being like, this is weird that Jules is not here. Jules is usually. So.
Yeah, I do like to attend all the different classes. I sometimes turn the camera off because sometimes I'm just like lying on the mat having a little kip or have a little cry. And sometimes I'm wobbling. Actually, most of the time I'm wobbling. But yeah, I think what I love is just all the different types, like just trying it. Like, I'd never done HIIT yoga and bar and things like that. My kind of yoga tends to be sort of like sleepy yoga. Yeah. So to try all of them and to feel like safe as well, to come to classes and just know that if I'm needing to turn the camera off and have a little cry or, I don't know, have a cup of tea whilst I'm doing it, I can do that. Whereas, in regular yoga classes, I don't think I could get away with a cuppa and asleep.
Yeah, exactly. So I was wondering if you could give me a bit of context into how you started drinking.
Okay. Whew. I would say that my childhood, unfortunately, was very dysfunctional, and I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. And I learned early on different numbing techniques, different ways to just not be present. And I would say that 2 of the main sort of things that helped me, they were tools at the time, was creativity, but also alcohol. And I think I started drinking very early. It was definitely in my very early teens. And I drank because I really loved it. I loved being numb. I loved being out of it. I was very introverted inside, but alcohol gave me extroversion. It gave me what I thought was confidence. It was my friend. I just found that alcohol was one of those things when I was younger, when I wasn't able to deal with a lot of emotions that were happening because of family dynamics, it enabled me to escape. But coupled with that was also creativity. So I think that's why creativity and alcohol and also now yoga has been very I can't say the word, synchronicity. And so that was sort of, I guess, my dark shadow was using alcohol, and my lighter side used creativity and playfulness. So yeah, I used it early on, and it was something that I used throughout my teenage years, my 20s, my 30s, and it wasn't until I hit 40 that I went, oh, I need to address this. I think it was when I hit 40.
And I think so many people can relate to that. I know I can, definitely, in terms of, using it as a coping mechanism. And I was also a very creative individual, right? And so I think I had these two sides of me. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to that too, because it does numb you out, which is, I had a podcast guest who said, it was a coping strategy and it worked for a while, and I could totally relate to that.
Yeah, I completely relate. It was in my toolkit. My toolkit was lots of creative stuff, and I didn't necessarily know it was about well-being, but the creativity kept me well. But the alcohol was definitely a coping strategy, and I would be like quite blatant about that and say, the only way I can cope is by having a gin and tonic and glass of wine and bottle and what have you. And it was like a badge of honour, and especially I think my generation, we're in our 40s and we did lots of partying and raving, and there was the ladette culture and lots of young girls and women. It was the thing to do was to get pissed and to definitely keep up with the boys. I definitely would be out and drinking as much as my boyfriends, and I was like half the size of them. I'm only 5 foot, so I'd be like swallowing myself with beer and gin and wine and thinking that was a good thing.
Yeah. Well, in a culture that's so normalized alcohol, and someone was commenting to me the other day, I can't remember who it was saying, I've noticed so many of your podcast guests are coming out of the UK, and the UK is one of our biggest, like we have Eastern Standard Time, we have, some people in the Middle East, and then we have the UK. And I think that's really interesting and probably really reflective of the drinking culture there.
Yeah, I would say it was a mark of passage. It was,
Right.
When you're a teenager, it was just completely normal. You would have been weird if you didn't drink, and it was normal to get so drunk that you'd black out. That was just normal amongst teenagers. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have a glass of wine with dinner.
Right.
It was, really potent, disgusting drinks, which, I remember mixing beer and cider and black currants and making concoctions, and that was like our taster before we went out clubbing. And that was just completely normalized. And in my 20s and my 30s, and then unfortunately, I think there's a really big culture around women when they get into their 30s and 40s, when women have babies and children, and you're a bit stressed and have your glass of wine, and there's a whole culture around that, around it's completely acceptable to get drunk on a Friday night if you have a nice wine glass and a nice posh bottle of wine. So it changed from really bad drinks as a teenager to posh bottles of wine, but that's acceptable. That's the acceptable face of big drinking. And I think there's a lot of women that are out there that maybe have children or, in high-powered jobs or just finding jobs really stressful. And you get to your 40s and it's accepted that we'd go round and have drinks, and that was seen as a coping mechanism.
Right.
And it's, it's just not. It's really not.
Right. And there's so much pressure on women in general. You know, it's almost like there's like this superwoman thing of like, you know, be the parent, have the career, do it all. And with nowhere to turn to, that can be the thing to turn to.
Completely. I see it in myself, and I see it in so many friends who unfortunately lose their identity and lose what they care about, what they're passionate about, and lose a sense of who they are because they're so busy. You know, again, it's another badge of honour is the busy. I used to carry it. People would say, "How are you?" And I'd go, "I'm busy, really busy," as though, again, that's a good thing, to be busy and exhausted. I saw it in myself, and that whole wanting to be I even remember saying to people, I want to be a superhero. And, you know, I got to 40 and just went, oh, I don't want to be a superhero anymore.
Yeah. Time to practice self-care. So we kind of talked a little bit about your increase in alcohol consumption over time. Where was the turning point for you when you wanted to, or when you started your sober journey?
So I hit 40,
yeah,
and I had the stereotypical midlife breakdown. It was inevitable, really. It was inevitable. I'd been working hard, really hard, like 7 days a week, completely burnt out. My face used to melt because I was so exhausted.
Right.
And I would top myself up with wine on a Friday and a Saturday night because I saw it as I deserve it. I deserve to get pissed because I've worked so hard. I deserve it. And unfortunately, at the age of 40, I had a breakdown. I say unfortunately, but I actually mean fortunately because it changed my life. It completely woke me up. And I hit 40 and everything began to unravel. All the person that I thought I was and the armour that I was wearing and the I'm a warrior, it just all fell apart. And I had to leave my job, I had to leave so many things, but I had to leave myself. And even though I look back at my old self and I love her, I love my old self, I also love who I am now and what I'm becoming and finding out who I am now. And I think so I'm 48, so it's taken me 8 years of exploring sobriety and healing, and I do sober Januaries, and then as soon as the last day of sober January, I'd line up my gin bottles and I'd be like, oh, I'm really deserving of this gin because I've just spent a month being sober, sorting my head out. Good idea to get pissed at the end of the month. And again, that's a normal, you know, we do dry Januaries and sober Octobers in Britain with the idea of, you know, definitely for me and others, to get pissed at the end. And it's like, no, I wanted to explore further. So I would dally in it, dilly-dally over the last couple of years. And then it was the last day of 2019 and it was New Year's Eve. And I was deciding to do another dry January. And in the morning I woke up and just went, I think I'm done. And it was a really clear marker in my head. It was like when I stopped smoking. When I stopped smoking, I was just like, yeah, I'm done now. I've smoked loads. Don't need to smoke anymore. And I sort of felt that with alcohol. It was I don't think I need to drink anymore. I don't know why I'm doing this. And I had, decreased and decreased and decreased over the years. And I'd been moderating. And then I just thought, no, I don't actually need it. Mm-hmm. So it's been 20 months. Wow. 20 months of being alcohol free, and it has been an adventure.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I honestly just got shivers when you said, you just had this feeling of you were done. Because yeah. I can kind of relate to that a little bit. I mean, I didn't know that I was quitting forever when I quit, but I could never do a dry January. I would look at people doing a dry January and be like, I could never, ever do that. And so the idea of me committing to a month alcohol free was massive. But there was this big feeling with certainty of like, it was like the same kind of feeling of certainty, but it was like, I'm done for a month. It was not like I'm done forever. And I think there are there are different kinds of people, and it sounds like I really connect to, like, we're similar in that regard. It's just rip the Band-Aid off, but it takes you a while to get to that point. And then when you rip it off, you're like, okay, it's done. Throwing that away.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think a lot of people, when you become alcohol free, you don't see the background, you don't see the steps leading up.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, you know, if you're out there saying I'm alcohol free, and you say, you know, I'm 20 months, people are like, oh wow, that's great, and how you just did it like that. And it's like, no. No, there was many years. And, you know, I look back at journals, and most of my journals say, I wish that I could moderate, I wish that I could stop, I'm going to stop for this month. Oh, I feel shame again because I drank last night. And, you know, it was a repetitive pattern,
Right.
you know, over the last many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely had that too. I don't know if I journaled super inconsistently, but I bet even as young as like in my early teens, I was like, I wish I didn't drink.
Yeah.
Took me like a decade to finally quit.
Completely. And I think that, I know when I was younger, I had regret because I'd have a hangover or I'd have done something really stupid. But as time went on, it was like the regret became shame.
Yeah.
And it became feeling of like anger towards myself that I wasn't able to hold my drink. I wasn't, you know, I went to places and I'd black out a lot. And I just thought, you know, the amount of times that happened, I just thought, this isn't good for me. This isn't healthy. You know, it wasn't a vodka in the morning over my cornflakes. And I was a binge drinker, so I wouldn't drink for ages, and then I would blow out, and then the regret and the shame the next morning, and checking my texts to make sure that I hadn't sent exes any messages or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can so relate to that feeling. So you and I connected originally, I think, through One Year No Beer way back. And now, you know, we're obviously connected through Sober Curious Yoga and the Mindful Life practice. I'm wondering if you could tell me a bit about, you know, the different tools that you used when you were quitting drinking on your journey.
So I really like structure. I thrive with structure. And I thought I needed a program. So I started off with One Year No Beer, which was brilliant, but I found it overwhelming. And there are amazing people that I connected with, and I'm so grateful for it. But I found myself getting lost amongst, you know, many people on the Facebook site that One Year No Beer has. But I did make some beautiful connections, and one of them was yourself and a couple of other people who were like my lighthouses, like absolute lighthouses. So for me, I think it was the structure that I was really needing, and I needed community. I think that was my biggest thing. When I decided to stop drinking a couple of years ago, I had no community. There wasn't anybody that was not drinking other than people who were maybe sort of hardcore serious drinkers who were wanting to give up and were following the AA route. And I explored that, but I just thought, well, it's not tallying. I'm much more about holistic. I'm interested in the psychology of why people become addicted. So for me, AA wasn't the route for me to go down. So I knew that I needed other people who were maybe like me or in similar sort of communities. And I would say that has been one of the biggest and most important things is meeting others. And most of them I met online, and they live across the world. But it's just, you know, shame dies, doesn't it? Shame dies when you can share your story with others. Yeah. And, you know, one of my heroes, Brené Brown, I think she's been sober like 25 years or something like that. And she was, you know, a catalyst for me. As part of my sobriety, I just thought, you know, if this amazing woman who's all about vulnerability and shame is sober and is able to share her story, then maybe I could share with others, because I've kept a lot of myself hidden. You know, doing this is like, oh my God, exposing. But, you know, I'm at a stage now where it's like, I'm really proud. I'm so proud of being alcohol free. I really am. So I would say community, connection, and consistency. Before I stopped drinking, I wasn't consistent. I was all over the shop. I'd be very much all or nothing. I would do 10 exercise classes a day or not anything for a week. I would eat healthy for a week and then live on pizza. I was incredibly inconsistent. And for me, I thought that was my most important thing, was consistency, is wake up every morning with intention, journal, I meditate, I do my yoga. Every single day I have a routine and a structure which keeps me on the path, and it keeps me grounded. You know, I have a tendency to be manic or asleep. I'm either manic or asleep. I just thought my sobriety needs to have safety around it. And for me, that's structure. Hence coming to yoga classes every day, because it gives me that purpose, it gives me that reason, it gives me community, and sharing with other people the ups and downs of sobriety and healing. So yeah, I would say that for me is the most important thing, is community and consistency. And big cups of coffee.
Yes, I've got mine too.
Decaf. I can't have caffeine anymore.
Oh, really?
Oh, that's the other thing, is when I gave up alcohol, I can't have sugar, I can't have caffeine. I went from one extreme to the other. So now everything's decaf.
And we were speaking about this, I think I was speaking about this the other night with Lee. Maybe, I think you might have been there in the sober circle. We were talking about how so many people go alcohol free and then make other big lifestyle changes like vegetarian, or I know I had this massive ripple through my life where I became alcohol free and then vegan and then stopped coffee and then sugar for like in a really short span of time. Yeah. And then I ended up bringing some of those things back into my life. Deciding that the most important thing for me is sobriety. And then I'm like, okay, if I have some sugar or some coffee, it's okay.
Yeah. And I can understand it. And definitely from my own perspective, I'm very extreme and all or nothing, and I have an addiction to everything. I could be addicted to avocados. It's like I just have a very sort of, when I want to do something, I'm incredibly focused, and I will do it, but I will do it to an extreme. So I will exercise to an extreme, I'll be sober to an extreme, I'll be no sugar to an extreme, and again, I think that being sober has allowed me to find that middle path, you know, that place of it's all right to just slow down and to find that middle place of groundedness, and life is so much sweeter.
Yeah. So tell me about your journey becoming a yoga teacher. And I think you and I are similar in the sense that we were both practicing and teaching yoga before sobriety, right? And so tell me about, first of all, becoming a yoga teacher, and then how it's different. I guess I shouldn't ask two questions at once. Start with tell me about becoming a yoga teacher.
So I practiced yoga on and off, I think, I don't know, over 20 years. And I had sort of an inconsistent practice. And then when I had my breakdown, I was very, very ill. I was really ill and I couldn't get out of bed. And I needed to do something, and I just did very simple breath practice, meditation practice, and yoga. It essentially saved my life. It really did. And I just thought, I want to learn to be a teacher for me. And if I share that with others, that's brilliant. But I very much wanted to learn to understand why I was doing these postures. What was this philosophy? What was it about? What was behind the classes that we go to? Why do we do this? And why did it have such an amazing effect on my life?
Yeah.
You know, I discovered self-compassion through yoga. I didn't even know what that meant before I had my breakdown. And I would say that was really when I started. So I trained as a children's teacher and then a teenager, and then realised I didn't want to work with kids. I was like, I've worked for years with kids, and I just thought, oh man, I don't have the energy for that anymore.
Same.
And then, unfortunately, I was in a very unhealthy marriage and left the marriage and went and lived in an ashram for a couple of months in Wales. And I come from Wales, so I just thought, let's go full circle, go and retrain to be a yoga teacher. And so I spent a couple of months being alcohol free, living in an ashram, and it was amazing. It was, I suddenly sat with all those feelings that I'd been repressing for years, and I just thought, even if I never teach a class of yoga, that to me isn't why I'm doing this. I need to learn for me. I need to understand what yoga is about for me. It's my journey. It's my connection to myself, to my real self, and it's a way of connecting with others. So I did my training, and then I think it was that was quite a few years ago now, but like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And over the past couple of years, I've been teaching yoga classes, and I've been working in creativity and wellbeing work, ironically, which I wasn't able to look after myself, but I could look after others.
Yeah.
And yoga enabled me to have the tools to start looking after myself. It was like I was your stereotypical healer, where I'd look after others, care about others, support others, but I didn't do that for myself. And when I trained to be a yoga teacher, that's when I started learning to make sure I did my own practice first, to fill my cup. And that for me was what yoga teaching was about, that in order to support, to teach, to work with others, I do it for myself first, and then I have enough to authentically give to others rather than give it from a place of lack.
Mm-hmm. And so did you find, like for myself, I found my yoga experience shifted after sobriety. Did you feel that as well? And what changed for you?
Oh my God, completely. I think it was the embodiment of it. I began to really embody my practice and to really think about, the philosophy and how can I apply that philosophy practically in everyday life. I think that often people see yoga and they see the postures on Instagram and things like that and don't equate it to actually the philosophy and why we do yoga. And for me, it was very much about self-compassion. That when I first was practicing yoga, it was hardcore. I did power yoga and Ashtanga yoga, which is great, but I couldn't do that now.
Yeah.
And I think I ended up, when I became sober, doing yin like twice a day. I'd gone from being yang, very yang, to completely yin. And I would say my practice now is much more balanced, but I think I spent the first 6 months of sobriety just lying there on the mat crying, doing yin and having a sleep. I think that was my yoga practice for 6 months.
And that's funny because I went the opposite way in that, or not the opposite way, but I became so yang. Like I remember the summer I was coming up to 100 days sober, and I had a personal trainer, was doing my bar training, was doing my spin instructor training. And when I got to yoga, I could only do yin. And I couldn't even do shavasana. It was I had to come into child's pose. There was something about putting my head on the mat. I was just so go, go, go. And luckily that's kind of chilled out of it. Now I have a really good balance. I have my yin, I have my bar, it's all good. And
I think it is, I think I'm finally getting the balance, because I think I did 6 months of yin and I think I did 6 months of HIIT, and I went through a very similar thing of sleeping, and then I was high, really high, and now I would say I'm just finding the balance. And I think it's about listening. about listening to myself. I think my yoga practice, I didn't used to listen. I didn't used to listen to myself about anything. You know, I just was not connected to myself. And I would say the past couple of years, that has been the most sort of change with my yoga, is that I listen. And if I go to a class and I just want to lie down, I will. You know, I'd go to classes and in the olden days and try and compete, and my ego would be there, and I'd be like, she's really bendy, I'm going to be bendy too. Whereas now I'm like, I'm just going to do child pose. I'm just going to rest. I'm just going to turn up. That's enough.
And that's what really is the sign of an advanced practice, I think. It's like having the humility to not worry about what anyone else is doing and just kind of feel into your own experience.
Yeah, and I think that it took me a long time to get there, because my ego wouldn't let me, and I had to, you know, I got very ill, so it meant I had to stop, and I had to listen to my body, and I had to listen to what my body was screaming and shouting, and once I did that, that's when the body mind connection started happening.
So tell me about your journey becoming Sober Curious yoga teacher. What made you want to become involved in the program?
For me, again, sobriety and yoga just go hand in hand, absolutely hand in hand. And I know how much it impacted me. I know that, again, as I said, that structure, having connection, talking with other people, and knowing that other people have got similar experiences, like authentic conversations about sobriety and well-being, rather than, you know, pretense and putting on a mask. And it was enlightening. It was just enlightening to be around other sober people who all practice yoga in all different kinds of ways across the world. And I just thought, when the opportunity came about, I just have to. Again, it was similar to when I trained to be a yoga teacher. I just thought, let's just do this for me. You know, all of my yoga teacher training has been, let's do this for me. Let's learn and explore and experiment and see what happens, and allow things to unfold. And so when the training came up, I just was really excited. I also won the training, didn't I? Which is even better.
I was thinking, didn't you win the cruise and then you did the training? I was actually just thinking about that, because I said, I don't think I told you this, but I was like, I'm going to print a picture of Jules' face and carry it around the cruise. And then I was just so busy the day of that I forgot.
I was there. So I'd entered the draw and I'd won a cruise in Abu Dhabi, which sounds amazing, but given that I live in Bristol in the UK and we're in the middle of lockdown, I just thought, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to get to. Might be quite challenging, but, you know, I could try it. And then I was really cheeky and said, look, this is a great prize, but could I have the Sober Girls yoga teacher training? And you said, yeah, that would be great. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad, because again, it felt like it was the next step that I didn't necessarily know. If you'd have said to me 20 months ago, Jules, you'll be teaching sober yoga, I just was across the world. I would have been gobsmacked. I would have been, how does that work? And again, being sober, I've let things unfold. Like, the control has had to be, you know, let go of, and I've had to surrender to whatever opportunities and things arrive. So for me, the sober training tallied, and it very much brought home a lot of my own experiences of sobriety and yoga, and it's just been beautiful. You know, how amazing to share two things that are really important to me with other people. It's like, what a lovely opportunity, and it means that I hope to see other people's journeys. And, you know, we're all different, we're all unique, we've all got different journeys and reasons why we're on this path, but it's beautiful watching other people grow and change and develop and go on, you know, this adventure that we're all on together.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I'm the same way. I don't think I ever would have thought I would be doing sober yoga, honestly. And when I tell people the story of how it unfolded, it makes so much sense in retrospect, like all the steps and all the different evolutions of this program to be like where it is now. But yeah, 3 years ago, I would have probably laughed if someone said that to me.
I think that's what sobriety and being alcohol free, being on this adventure can do, is that it just opens up possibilities and it opens up opportunities. And I think I was saying to you and a couple of others, I met with some friends recently and they said, oh God, are you not drinking? That must be so boring. And I really had this feeling inside of me of, oh no, my life really isn't boring. I was really fearful that my life would be boring when I gave up drinking, but if anything, my life has been like just so much more real, and like just I feel so much more me since I've stopped drinking, and I don't have to pretend and I don't have to hide, and I'm naturally, when I'm out with lots of people, I'd rather be at home with a nice cup of tea and a hot water bottle. I don't have to go out to the pub anymore and pretend to be this extrovert social person, where actually I'm a bookworm and I like being quiet and and resting. So yeah, I think that I would definitely say for me that sobriety has opened up so many doors I never thought would be opened, and I'm just embracing it all, embracing all these adventures, seeing what happens next. And if nothing happens, it doesn't matter because I'm sober.
Yeah.
Rather than the grasping and trying to, find things. And, in the olden days, I'd be constantly trying too hard and working too hard. Whereas now it's like I just allow things to sort of unfold and happen, and see what resonates with me, and if it doesn't, I don't follow it, and if something resonates with me, I try it and embrace it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. The adventures that come from sobriety, and you're right, people often think it's boring, but it's probably the most exciting time my life has ever been.
That's the thing, I think there's so many of us, it's like, I have so many friends and connections now who are in the alcohol-free communities. I would say none of them are boring.
Yeah.
They've got all different things that are going on. I just don't equate being alcohol-free with boring. And
Totally.
as I said, when my friend said to me, is your life boring? I didn't even have to justify it, because inside I just had this inner knowing and this inner smile of, no, no,
Totally.
no. Boring is, getting pissed and falling over and blacking out and not remembering the next day, and eating rubbish food and repeating that for years and making very, unhealthy choices. And I try not to do that anymore now. I'm more awake and more conscious about those choices that I make. And maybe boring is, having a nice book to read and a nice cup of tea, but I choose that.
Yeah. Same. All right. I have one last question for you, Jules. What advice would you give in general to someone who is interested in quitting drinking?
For me, would say that find your communities, find people that you can connect with online, in the real world. Like, so where I live in Bristol, there's Sober Circle Southwest, which is, for people that live in the UK. Find people on Facebook, on Instagram, follow people. Like my Facebook and my Instagram now is mainly made up of alcohol-free health, healing and well-being. And podcasts, I love podcasts. There's some amazing podcasts out there, this one included. But listen to people and, find your tribe, definitely find your tribe. And for me, I had to go into therapy. I definitely equate my trauma and my alcohol usage. So for me, that was my journey. So if that's something that, isn't for you, then you don't do it. But if you think, do you know what, maybe I do need to talk to somebody, or I do need to go to a safe space to share some of my experiences, I would highly recommend doing it, because it really supported me in my sobriety, is to find a space just to unpack. When I became sober, a lot of feelings arose and a lot of overwhelming feelings began to stir, and I needed spaces, I needed a place to talk to. The biggest thing is just embrace it as an adventure. You know, it really is. It's like, try it. Do a day sober, do a week, do an hour, you know. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I'd said to myself, I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life, because as you said, that's so overwhelming and terrifying. But it was just like, I just knew that I was done. But yeah, you know, take little steps. That's been my motto all the way through this, is little steps. You know, take it gentle. Find ways to be kind and loving to yourself, and have maybe an awareness of your triggers. You know, for me, Friday night was my trigger. That was my night of going, I've had a really long week, I'm really knackered. Friday night, bottle of wine, because that'll help. That'll help my exhaustion. So I now, on a Friday night, I do a yoga class, I do a HIIT class just to burn off that energy. I have routines in place. So instead of my typical Friday, where I would have drunk a whole bottle of wine and eaten a load of chocolate, I put things that care for me and nurture me and enable me to have a really lovely weekend, so I don't wake up. Or also have a really early morning class, 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday. I get up and do Alex's class. I literally roll out of bed, I'm in my pajamas, and I get to yoga at 6:30 in the morning. You can't do that with a hangover.
And I always think about you guys, and I'm like, I don't know how you're doing it, because I am also rolling out of bed at 9:30. And we're all just waking up together.
I know. Well, I have discovered my mornings since I've been alcohol free. I didn't know before 7 o'clock existed, and now I'm up usually about sort of 5:36. And for me that's really helped, is that I can't have a hangover the night before, because you can't get up at 6 in the morning to go and do yoga. It's like,
you know what? I actually, as we're talking about it, I was so morning when I first got sober. And I think what has actually shifted it is that I'm doing business with people in the West. And so I'm late at night with them. And that's the only reason my morning, and now that I'm not working at, you know, the 6 a.m. teaching job, my mornings have gotten later. But I definitely can relate with you. I remember I used to get up at the sunrise, and I kept putting it on my Instagram story, but no one knew about my sober journey at that point. So I just seemed like this really annoying yoga person that was like, live, love, life, 5 a.m. sunrise. And then once you become vulnerable and you share, you know, this is why, it becomes, I think, a bit less annoying.
I've seen that with lots of people becoming alcohol free, is we find our mornings, and it's like you can get so much done. You can. I don't know. I do pack so much in the morning, but I do need to sleep in the afternoon, and it's like that's my balance now. Sleep in the afternoon, up in the morning.
Yeah, love it. Well, Jules, I want to thank you so much for taking time to be on the show. It was honestly wonderful to sit down with you. And it just feels like chatting with a good friend, because we've become such good friends over this pandemic. So I really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners will take a lot from this episode. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for popping my cherry in my podcasting. Thank you very much.
And I think I'll see you in a few hours, right? Are you coming to yoga?
Yeah, in bar.
See you soon.
Thank you,
all right,
bye.
take care, Jules. Bye.